Hello, everybody, and welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions, we've got guesses. I'm Nash, been doing Radio Dead Air for ages. But in addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who also works in IT. If you have tech questions for us, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com. We'll do our best to help you out with those. So how are you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. I discovered in the last few minutes that trying to use USB phone tethering for internet in Windows 11 is not the simple plug and chug that it was under Windows 10 because I couldn't get it to work, but then my router came back up.
Well, that's irritating. Yeah, speaking of Windows 11, I was very ill this weekend. Bad takeout, very bad takeout. Bad. And
I told you not to go back to Juan the Mandarins.
That aside, I was planning on this week coming to take a few days off from game streaming and doing a full reinstall of Windows on my system and move it to Windows 11 because it's time. My install of Windows 10 is very old, and this is something that I'm not sure a lot of people appreciate. Windows is not a great operating system for a number of reasons. See, if
there's this thing called cruft, and it's not the dog thing, and it builds up.
Yeah, it's like, to give you an example, if you're on Mac OS and you want to install a program, you can either go through the OS store or the App Store, or you can simply take the files for the application, put it in a folder, click on the application. There you go. It's installed. That's it. There's no files. But Windows does this really irritating thing because it's kind of a hodgepodge, and it's all about the registry. See, Windows, instead of putting everything necessary for an application in one place, it puts some of it over here, and some of it over here, and some of it over here. Some of it's in program files. Some of it's in the Windows directory.
It's not really Windows doing it. It's Windows saying to developers, these are the places you can put this stuff, but you can also put it anywhere you want to.
So the only way for Windows to keep track of all those files is something called the registry. It is basically a big list of settings, file locations, various and sundry. It's everything Windows needs to know to run stuff. The problem.
Now, these all used to be contained in things called INI files, which was initialization files, and apparently this was decided it was too easy.
Well, it's part of it is stuff like Windows has things like DirectX and other APIs that it's simply easier for the programs to call on those than to put all of that in the INI file. However, over time, all of your installations, your uninstalls, all of your
reinstalls,
everything builds up and builds up and builds up in the registry until eventually Windows starts getting a little weird.
Yes. Now, one of the reasons it can get weird is because there'll be programs that say, I had version 6 of this program, and it had these settings in the control panel, in the registry. And now I got version 7, and it's got different settings, but it still might look at some of those version 6 settings. We mentioned this last week with Nvidia cards.
Yeah.
Because if you don't uninstall completely everything, some of those settings can remain, and they can mess things up.
So what has to be done with Windows, eventually, a Windows installation must be wiped clean. You cannot and I have stubbornly kept using this because I have so much important critical stuff on here. I've kept using it for way longer than I needed to. Upgrading to Windows 11, just doing an upgrade installation would not help because the registry would still be there. It would carry over from Windows 10. I need to start fresh. And that's going to take...
Some of it might get blown away, but some of it might not. And the parts that it's the might not.
Yeah. And that's going to take that's going to take days to sort out because not only do I have to do a full system backup just in case, I also have to go through every critical program I use, like OBS and Winamp and game settings and all the things and my video editing, all of those files. I have to keep track of the plugins, any plugin settings I have, any program settings I have, all of these things I have to keep and save in a separate file. Wipe the drive. I'm probably going to do a full wipe, even though I'm going to move stuff. I'm going to have to move stuff out of program files, and I'm going to have to move stuff out of my documents, and I'm going to have to move all that stuff to another drive. Start fresh, and then it's going to be a reinstalling things, making sure I have the plugins back, making sure I have the settings back, and making sure everything works properly after it's all done. And that's going to be a task.
The other alternate to this, which is kind of what I did with the new computer, is I put brand new drives in there and I pulled my old drives and I just started copying data over. And like, here's the settings file for this program that I use. It's copied over. Here's the settings file. Nash's setup is a lot more complex than mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I can get away with that. And he probably cannot.
No,
now,
because
there are settings files. Now, when I say pull drives, I didn't actually pull drives. I copied stuff onto an external. And I need to pull the drives because there's stuff I've found I missed.
Yeah, it's So anyway, that's not going to happen this week. It's going to have to be probably another week because I missed a lot of streaming this week and I don't like getting behind that much. But anyway. All right, so let's get to some news stories before we get to your questions. By the way, just send those along. We got little room this week. Let's start with this again. And this is Der Bauer has been doing a lot of good work on this. You should follow Der Bauer on YouTube because he's not only is he one of the people behind Thermal Grizzly, he's also a very intelligent tech YouTuber with reviews and insight into how things work. And this is going on.
He knows his stuff is what we're saying here.
Yeah, this is going on the hell again. So the freaking RTX 5090 graphics cards are melting power cables again.
It was, I believe, the great sage, Bradley Noel, who said, want to let it burn, want to let it burn. Want to let it burn.
We have been, the tech community has been tracking this issue since the 4090 came out, which was, and now it's carried over to the 5080 and the 5090. What is going on here? Well,
I'll tell you, one of the things going on here is they're drawing too much power through too small a pin. And they said, wait, no, we put in this new adapter. We put in this new plug that you wouldn't be able to do that on. And Bauer says, wait a second. Did you do the thing where you balanced how much power you're pulling in?
Now, the 39...
a look on their face like they're going, is that a thing? Yeah, you did it on your previous cards.
Yeah, the RTX 3090 had load. What we're talking about load balancing is every one of those wires has a different function. But on the PCIe connector function, the main wires carry either a ground connection or a 12 volt connection. And you don't want all the 12 volts going down over just one of those wires.
Well, no, you can have 12 volts, but you don't want all the amps going down. All the amps,
yeah, because Der Bauer actually got a meter out to check this. One of those, for some reason, while he was doing some tests, one of those wires got ridiculously hot, and he clamped the meter over it, and that one wire was drawing 20 amps all by itself.
Which is not good.
And what happens is on the 3090, the RTX 3090, which was the first card to use this connection, The card had a built-in method of balancing the load. If one wire was drawing too much amperage, it would force another wire to take over the slack. And there are multiple wires on there. And that's how you're supposed to send power down this thing. You're supposed to balance out the amount of amperage per wire. For some reason, the 4090 and the 5090 and the 5080 do not have proper load balancing.
No. And this is the kind of thing that should be, I won't say even should be, was relatively simple to do because they did it in the past. Why they decided, well, we don't need to do this, I don't know.
And the fault here is this cable is already running at the limit of the spec, which is not something they shouldn't have done. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen from a tech company. Nvidia saw this connector, saw it was rated for 600 watts, and said, let's just use that, without taking into account that that's the upper limit of the spec. It's not meant to run 600 watts constantly.
No.
It can handle 600 watts for a limited time, but typically with a connector like this, you want to stay under that wattage level, not pushing right up against it. And that's what the 5090 and the 4090 and now the 5080, well, the 5080, this was the 360 watts. Regardless, that's what they're doing. They're pushing up against this. I haven't had any problems with my 4080. And I'm going to wager it's because I'm using one of Thermal Grizzly's wire view connectors on it. It's an in-between between the power connector and the video card itself. And what it does is it monitors how much power your card is using. But I'm willing to bet there's some load balancing feature on the wire view that is preventing all of the power from coming up a single wire at one time.
Yeah, because two of those wires are signaling wires, and it could have some circuitry, and they're going, no, this is too much, man.
So it's entirely possible. I'm not going to put that out there as a solution to this, because even Der Bauer has said the wire view was not designed for this. No. They have a new version of the wire view, the Wire View Plus, that has like alarms built into it and a temperature sensor and all this stuff to see if something's going wrong, just to be a backup in case something screws up. Because Der Bauer's solution for this is probably the most sensible one, and that's that this card should be using, if they're insisting on using this stupid connector, the card should be using two of them. There should be two separate power wires coming from your power supply into the video card.
Problem we're going to run into with that is that, one, there aren't a huge number of power supply models that have two of those.
Well, mine doesn't even have that, but there are PCIe to this connector adapters. I'm using one, and those are, if you use like 3 PCIe plugins on your power supply to this connector, it's absolutely fine, because that can handle the voltage with no trouble. The big issue here is Nvidia mainly used this connection for one of the dumbest reasons ever, and that was aesthetic reasons. The problem with the older PCIe connector is, in order to get enough power to this card safely using those old connectors, they would have had to use 4 power cables to the 5090. And Nvidia did not want that. That looked bad. That was a.
Well, there was also a, we're taking up too much space on the card.
Yeah, real estate on the PCB. So they figured
two of these 12 volt, what's it? It's 12 bhp
Actually, it's 12V. It's 12V 6x6 now. This is the VHP WR was the original, and then they had the revision, which was 12V 6x6, which it's still the load balancing issue. It's not the connector so much as it's the card is not balancing the amperage properly. Like even some other people have tested it, even when it's behaving itself. Each of these individual wires are rated for 9.5 amps. And some people have found these wires pulling as much as 11 amps, which is not going to straight up melt it immediately, but that's out of spec. That's way out of spec.
Like if you said 9.9?
9.5.
9.5. If they're rated 9.5 and they're pulling 9.6, I go, okay, that's within standard tolerance. I'd be like, it's a little high, but I'm not worried about it. At 10, I'm a little worried. At 11,
10 and 11,
I'm a lot worried.
That's out of specification for the part. So this is going to keep happening, and this essentially means that the 5090 is a flawed product. There's no way to fix this.
I'm shocked that, well, no, they could possibly fix it. Well, no.
No, there's no software fix for this.
It depends if the circuitry's on the card and they're just not using it.
It's apparently not. So there's no proper load balancing on this card. If that's the case, this is a flawed product. And not only is this a flawed product, this is a MSRP of $1,700.
This is supposed to be a flagship product that they shipped broken. That cannot be fixed. And not just broken, dangerous and broken.
This can start fires. This is a video card that can start fires. And I know enthusiasts who get this, who are going to spend the money on this, will go out of their way to try to compensate for it. But if I'm dropping $1,700, which is really wildly optimistic considering the market right now, you're more looking closer to $3,000 to get a hold of one of these right now. If I'm dropping that much money on a product and it could potentially set my computer on fire, why? That's ridiculous. Like Nvidia has just, I don't know what the hell is wrong with them. Just this insistence on this power connector going forward. Now, keep in mind, if you're running if you're going to be running, say, a 5060, a 5070, anything down the product stack, you're probably not, even if it uses this connector, you're probably not going to have that much problems with it because they're not going to be drawing anywhere near the amperage that the 5090 does. The wattage requirements on those are way lower. They're something like 200 under that. This thing draws close to 600 watts. It's like a 570 watt card. That's too much for this design. And this is entirely NVIDIA's fault. The problem is we're going to be speculating for more years to come why exactly this is happening, because NVIDIA is not being incredibly forthcoming. They insist on keep using this connector, even though it demonstrably melts. And we're all just going to be kind of like, I don't know what is happening. The only safe thing to say is avoid the high-end cards from NVIDIA. Like, I don't know, most people are not going to be buying them anyway, but just, this is ridiculous. I haven't seen anything like this in tech ever.
Tesla Cybertruck?
Well, that's not tech. That's stupidity. Well, how about here's
so is not load balancing your current inputs.
Well, let's get a little bit of good news. This potentially seems like good news, even though it's based on a rumor. Just the fact this rumor is coming out from a reputable source, kind of hopeful on this one. A rumor has come out about the Intel next generation of Intel Arc cards, the ones that are going to follow Battle Mage, which are their current cards, they're going to be called Celestial. And we were all worried that due to everything going on with Intel right now, that Celestial is dead, that we wouldn't going to be seeing another generation of Intel video cards, when for the money, they are a great budget option right now. Well, the good news here appears to be that not only is Intel Celestial, Arc Celestial, still going forward, Intel is bringing it back in-house. Instead of going to TSMC to use their foundry process, they're finally going to be moving back to an Intel foundry. Now, in-house is a stretching it because there's some separation now between Intel Foundry and Intel as a company. They're trying to sort their crap out. But just the fact that this is still being worked on, that there are plans for this, and we are going to, we're going to see the release of these cards, presumably in about another year and a half or so. That's really good. It means we're still going to see development on Battle Mage. There's no word of we're going to see the high-end Battle Mage cards, the 750 and the B750 and the B76, or I think the B770 and the B760. Presumably, those would be the names for them. No word that they're going to release those, but the idea that we're still at least going to see Celestial come out means there's still hope for competition in the market. And Intel's taking focus squarely on the budget market is so necessary right now.
Indeed.
Nvidia has completely abandoned it. It's gone. AMD may offer some competition here, but we haven't. The last budget card we saw from AMD was the RX 6500. That really crappy card that was actually a mobile GPU that was strapped onto a PCIe card, and it had limited PCIe connectors, and it was garbage, and they tried to sell it for like $300 or something. It would be nice to see AMD come up with a response to Intel stuff where we can get prices. We need $200 video cards. I mean, even that's pushing it a lot, but the fact Intel's come out with a $250 1440p gaming card is filling a hole in the market so big that demand for these things are completely out of stock, and they keep staying out of stock. That tells you how big the demand in the market is for this. Nvidia
what it should do is also tell Intel's bean counters how big the demand in the market is, and should make them go, maybe we should do something more with these.
Like, Nvidia will not make something below their supposedly 60 class cards, and that's a whole misnomer about whether those actually really 60 class cards anyway. But they're not going to sell any graphics cards, GPUs, less than $300 anymore. That's their entry level card is $300, and that's if the prices even get down that level. I'm pretty sure the 5060
partners don't often go that low. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure the 5060, if it comes, is going to be a $350 MSRP, which is ridiculous, especially when you're trying to build a budget system. That's $100. That can go into a ton of that. That can go into RAM. That can go into your power supply. That can go into a ton of different things you need to put in. That's not the video card, just for a budget gaming system. So the fact that Celestial seems to still be being worked on is a very good sign. If Intel and AMD are going to be competing back and forth on this, and Nvidia has abandoned this end of the market, that's fine. Just as long as there's some competition here and some pressure on AMD to release something that's more affordable with their 9000 series cards, which the 9070 is supposed to be set for March release is where we're first going to see it. So we'll see what that looks like. And we haven't seen the higher level of Battle Mage yet, but even just the basic Battle Mage cards have been pretty nice. And finally, other little bit of good news. I do appreciate that for whatever other issues Valve has, they care enough about their public perception and about how Steam looks to the market that they really are not patient with any sort of dickery from people putting stuff on their market.
Yeah. And today's dickery that's been banned is mandatory ads.
Yeah, you are not. Steam has changed its guidelines to prohibit forcing players to watch advertisements in a game. If your game has ads, that's all right. Just so long as players are not, it's not mandatory, which that's a balancing act right there already. I mean, I don't like having advertisements in games already, but you know, mandatory.
There's a big difference between you're tooling around in whatever cyberpunk clone you're looking at this week, and there's a Coca-Cola can on the counter, versus you're tooling around and suddenly the game pauses to show you a minute and a half ad on Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Or if you just if your pause screen makes you watch, like you're trying to pause the game and it plays a video ad that you cannot pass by, if you want to come back to the game, you have to watch the whole ad before you can unpause. That's the kind of crap they pull too. Now you'll still be able to like the example they give is that if you're in a sports game and someone has like a Nike ad or a Coke ad in the background, that's perfectly acceptable. You know,
because that's just sort of there. It's not. You're not forced to watch it. You can turn your basketball player the other direction and not see it, or just not pay attention to it. It's not interrupting the flow of the game. It's not breaking immersion. I mean, I suppose if there was a fantasy game and there was a big banner for Coca-Cola, that'd be breaking immersion, but it wouldn't necessarily be against these rules.
Yeah, and people are pointing out this is a mobile game issue, and that's entirely what Steam is trying to head off. Because if you try to play a mobile game, there are quite often times you cannot proceed in the game without watching an advertisement.
Yeah, and by the way, one of the ways some games have gotten around that, I'm just going to not in the Steam situation, but in the mobile situation, is they'll go, you know what, we really don't make a lot of money from these ads. So if you give us $3, your entire game is now ad free.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will go, $3? I'll pay $3 as a one-time fee. I enjoy this game. And the ads are gone.
Yeah, it's worth it not to be bothered. But I appreciate that Steam, their domain is PC gaming. And they're trying to stake out here, we're not going to allow people to manipulate.
They're not going to allow this level of enshittification to happen.
Yeah. Man, and it's not even the matter of being, we are being magnanimous. It's the matter of this can ruin your reputation. And Steam they don't have a lot of competition, but they do have to keep their eye on Epic right now.
And like I said, this is just them going, we do not care to be associated with this nonsense, so we're not going to allow it.
I mean, Epic is not as big of a not anywhere near as big of a market share as Steam is, but Steam still has to be concerned about it, because if Epic can say, hey, we're not allowing ads, that's a marketing point they could use to make Steam look bad. And I think Steam is learning that that's one of those that, like the whole Unity debacle, which, just as a side note, if you haven't heard, Unity laid off 1,800 people last week. Unity, to a recap of this, you might remember about 2 years back, Unity decided they were going to charge developers a per installation fee. So if you're end user of the game you developed using Unity, if the user, however many times people installed your game, that's how much money you owed Unity. And the backlash
which also meant if you installed the game and then your computer melted down and you rebuilt your computer, you installed the game again, technically that was 2 installs, even though the game company that provided that game only sold it to you one time.
So the backlash to that was so immediate and Unity broke so much trust with the game developing community. They have not been able to regain that. They are collapsing as a company. Even though that CEO is gone, the damage is done.
Oh yeah.
Unity, like letting go. I know the game developing market right now is not great, but Unity letting go 1,800 people, that's really bad. And I haven't heard anything from any other development tool maker, anything near the scale of that. That is entirely self-inflicted. So I'm pretty sure Steam is conscious of crap like that. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And if you really screw over your customers, they remember that. There's an entire movement right now dedicated to getting around and rid of Adobe. And then there's like whole instructions about,
God, I wish I could get rid of Acrobat at work.
Oh God, fucking Acrobats, fucking PDFs and anyway.
I'm going to say the most annoying thing about Acrobat. So Acrobat Reader comes on all our work computers. That's fine. That's fair. Plenty of things use PDFs. Some people have Acrobat Pro or other products which they use to make PDFs. And now the primary use of PDFs is to make forms that people fill in. And about 75% of the people I work with do not save their PDFs so that people with Reader can fill in those PDFs. It is 3 extra clicks. 3 extra clicks.
Oh boy.
And so what happens is someone comes to me and says, I need Acrobat Pro. And I say, why? So I can fill out this form. And I say, give me the form. And I fix the form. And I send it back to them and say, where did you get this form? And then I go to that person and I say, your form is wrong. Here is the right version of the form.
All right, let's get to our questions this week. We're going to start with Vet Gaming. And they asked a lot of questions. And it's a lot, but we are here to help. So we are going to do our best on this one. All right. Good evening, Nash, Mike, and ever-present floofy animals. I have 5 questions, of which only the first 2 are important. The rest may be skipped if you're strapped for time. Well, we'll see. First, because life always chooses the worst time to jump surprises on you, it's only been since this month I've actually been capable of browsing around for my PC upgrading, taking in mind your mid-range builds and my preferred online store, and trying to salvage as much junk for my current PC as possible, which turns out are just the optical drive, storage, GPU, PSU, cables, and accessories. You got a PC part picker. However, possible I'd like you to scan over this since I remember any brands involved are bad ones. Fortunately, I don't have time to rewatch episodes. I have to go and buy all the parts. All right, let me have a look at what you've got here. We've got Ryzen 7 7700X. Okay, that's fine.
Solid.
If you could find a 7700 and you get a significant discount on it, you might want to go there. But if the prices are comparable, there really is no advantage to getting the non-X version. Only if they're close in price. Thermalright Assassin X120. Might want to get something beefier than that.
Yeah, I would go beefier. I mean, even an extra $10 beefier here would help out a lot.
Because you are getting a 7700X, that is that will go up to about 108 watts. So that might get a little warm there. So think about, or at the very least, add a second.
It also depends on your environment you're using the computer in. If you live in the frozen north already, so.
Or even just looking at adding a second fan to this might make a big difference too. So you might want to think about that. But if you're going to buy a second fan, you might as well just get a bulkier cooler for it. You can think about that. Gigabyte B650 Eagle. It's a very stripped down board, but it will do the job.
If it does what you need it to do, it's okay. I mean, Gigabyte's a decent brand, so
yeah, it's not like a big flashy fancy board, but it'll do the works. That's fine. Corsair 32 gigabyte DDR5 6000. Yep, 6000 is about the speed you want for Ryzen 5. Western Digital Gold 12 terabyte. That's fine.
That's a huge data drive. Well done.
You've got your pre-existing. I think you got a pre-existing Kingston drive. That 1070. I mean, yeah, it's you're trying to salvage it from old system.
I would say that the video card is probably the first place you're going to look at upgrading. That's my thought.
Yeah, after all this, you might want to look at getting a slightly better video card. See about getting something
earlier, the battle mages would be head and shoulders above this.
Yeah, one of those $250. If you can get a B870, or was it B8? Is it B57? Yeah, B5. I always forget the. What is the B850? Is that it? Correct? Have I got that right? Yes, the B850.
That's right.
The B850, even the B870, or the B580. I can't say my brain bad. Even the B570, if you can get that closer to $200, would be a big upgrade over this. But for right now, there's not a lot of daylight between the B850, the B580, and the B570. So if you can get a hold of a B580, let's see, are they in stock right now? Anyone have this in stock?
Oh, yeah. Newegg has a few, but...
They actually have them in stock? Are they overpriced?
B570 for $230, unless you want to go with Gunner, in which case it is overpriced.
Yeah, let me see. Components, GPU. Let's see. Arc B series. Okay, apply. And let's see. No, their B580s are all out of stock. Yeah, the ARC, there's like one ARC B580 available from Newegg, and that's out of stock. You'd have to
get several, but okay.
Several,
but they're way overpriced.
Hold on, let me do another search here. Oh yeah, the overpriced ones, those are not sold by Newegg. Never buy any of them that aren't sold by Newegg.
That's the toggle I didn't have on.
Yeah. I'm only seeing two here, the Onyx Lumi and the Intel's branded one. Oh, and the Onyx Odyssey. And they're all out of stock right now.
Yeah.
But
there's a few more 570s that are in stock, but again, it's something to look for in the future.
Yeah. Right now, the Ryzen 7 7700X and the B650, that gives you a lot of headroom for upgrading later, and it's a pretty good GPU to start with. What just happened to my screen? Why you do that?
Okay. The only other comment I'd make about your parts list here is you do say Windows 10 Pro retail, keeping in mind Windows 10 end of lives in October.
Yeah. So you want to try and get Windows 11 on there as a replacement as soon as you can. All right. Tend to transplant the boot SSD straight onto the new motherboard. Do I have to do anything specific to make it work on the new PC? Yes. You can't. Windows installations are a lot more flexible than they used to be.
Indeed.
You can transfer your old installation to a new system, but before you do, you definitely want to remove your CPU drivers, all motherboard drivers, and just to be on the safe side, your GPU drivers as well.
And then you'll reinstall those on the new end.
Yeah, uninstall all of those just to make sure there's no conflicts between your old motherboard and CPU and your new motherboard and CPU. It doesn't take long to do, and I promise you it will save you headaches down the line. That's the main thing. Otherwise, you can just do an in-place, swap one to the other. You don't have to boot in the safe mode to transfer. Just uninstall the old drivers, and you should be good.
Now, safe mode, though, is where you go if something does go wrong, and you can sort out, it doesn't. Here's another driver it didn't like. Let me take that out.
For some reason, now this is confusing here. For some reason, every attempt I've made to install Windows has failed to install on a GPT drive. It always formats it back to an MBR drive. You're doing something wrong there.
So what I think this is,
there
is some screwiness with UEFI, where you have to go into legacy mode and then reformat the drive for GPT under UEFI, and then it will install. I've seen this a handful of times, and that is the first thing that came up when I just did a search on this. It doesn't happen on it's not consistent is the problem.
Yeah, the thing is, don't format it with just to be on the safe side, don't format it with the Windows installer. You can use gparted, which is a free hard drive partition. You can use that to format it as GPT, and you just let Windows redo what it needs to do. But yeah, there's something. My other thought was, are you installing the 32-bit version? But Windows 10 doesn't have a 32-bit version, does it?
No, it does.
It does? Windows 10 is... I thought Windows 11 doesn't have a 32-bit.
Correct.
Yeah.
But Windows 10 absolutely has 32-bit versions because I put it on machines at work.
Yeah, I would double check you're not... that would definitely cause it, because 32-bit version can't work with GPT. So that would definitely be causing it to revert in the installer. Make sure you're using the 64-bit version of Windows. There's no reason except for old compatibility to use a 32-bit version of Windows anymore. Should under no cert. So double check on that. Fourth, I have over the years repeatedly tried to get virtual machines to work so I could play old Windows XP and Windows 98 games on modern hardware. Usually it results in me giving up since I got Visual Boy Advance to work, and the VM was the closest success I've ever managed to achieve. My attempts at restoring my dad's old Win 98 PC have ended in exploded caps. Yikes. Is there any modern way to VM or emulate older Windows on modern Windows, or should I just cross my fingers and hope I find functional PCs of the era in a thrift store? I don't understand why you're having problems with it, because there are like tons of virtual machines software. What's the software called? Because I'm using it right now on it's virtual Linux, but I'm using it right now on my storage system.
VMware?
Let's see. VMware. Yeah, VMware, and it's free. Not VMware. Oracle VM VirtualBox. VirtualBox is the one I'm using. That's free for use. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's not working right, because it should entirely be possible. Now, you may have some issues with, if you're talking Windows 98, you might have some issues with games not seeing stuff like a Sound Blaster or IRQs or some DOS related stuff. That's a little harder to deal with in emulation. But once you get to XP, that's 98 is a little tricky, mainly because it's the sound card and video card goofiness of 98 that can be a little tricky, but XP shouldn't be giving you any trouble. XP was pretty XP was pretty solid so I don't know. Try and get back to us about this, something more specific about what issues you're having, because without more detail, we can't really help there. The last one, in regard to my first mail, asked about how serious the SSD required was. However, this requirement specifically is this requirement specifically for M.2 PCIe SSDs, or would a SATA SSD or possibly a USB flash drive also work? Okay. SATA SSD can work for this requirement. Because a SATA SSD will be as fast as SATA will allow. But at this point in the generation of SSDs, there really is no good reason to use a SATA SSD. It is effectively obsolete.
The only The only reason I can think of is your existing M.2 is not big enough for what you want to install. You just don't have space. And you don't have room on the board for another M.2. But you do have SSDs available. You do have SATA drives available.
I mean, at this point, I think it would be a smarter idea to use a PCIe to M.2 adapter and put it in a slot, because those are fairly cheap, and compared to SATA, the only thing left that's really useful for is old style spinning Rust hard drives, and those are going the way of the dinosaur too. The only advantage those have there is capacity. I still use one.
Note, looking at the motherboard that he picked, there is 3 M.2 slots available apparently.
Yeah. There's no reason not to use M.2. They're actually in some cases cheaper and easier to find than SATA SSDs. They're not making those anymore. You should SSD flash drives, however, no. USB flash drives, no. That's not. If a game requires an SSD, USB flash drives are not going to cut it. Even if they are very high speed, there's still latency in getting to the CPU from USB to CPU. That's why we don't just use USB drives for everything, because it seems like it would be simpler, right? Just get a USB, plug it in, you're done. There's a little element of latency between the USB interface and the CPU. The USB interface is not part of the CPU. There's a gap between the two of them. It's a separate chip on your motherboard, usually handled by the chipset or a secondary USB connector. And regardless of whichever one it is, it's still not the kind of latency that you get from pure PCIe M.2 straight to the CPU. So it's enough to cause problems. If a game says SSD required, USB isn't going to cut it. So, all right. I hope that's everything on that one. Next one. Keep going right along. This is from Hey Nash and Mike. This is from Darren in Toronto. This is a weird one. Sorry. Sorry. You said you were in Toronto. So I was rearranging. Okay. That's terrible, Mike. I was rearranging cables in my system last week. When I reassembled it, it was working fine for a little while, then suddenly switched off like I just lost power. I turned it back on. It was fine for about 15 minutes, then shut off again. This time I couldn't get it to power back up. It would get to a yellow light on the motherboard that immediately shut off. I took the side panel back off to examine the cables, tried to turn it back on. It finally started working again, but now I'm worried to put the panel back on. Obviously, this problem is with the cabling, but what? Is there a short or something broken? How do I find out? Okay,
so what this feels like is that the cable, when the panel is on, has just enough tension or something on one end of one of the connectors, probably not the power supply, that it is not solidly connecting. Now, maybe it's not fully plugged in, and it's just mostly plugged in. Or something is going on where there's tension there, and with the panel off, the pressure or tension is not present, causing the disconnect.
That's what
it feels like to me.
There's also a possibility you have a crimped wire by putting them on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crimping or tension, modern power supplies are pretty good at protecting themselves. If something starts getting a little weird, it will say no. And just to keep something from exploding into flames. Bad power supplies don't protect themselves very well. We've seen that as well as too.
Yes. Now, but neither is good at telling you why. It just goes, something's not right here. Now, if this was a server room situation, server room level power supplies might go and have diagnostics you could pull down and go, oh, it's this. But your home use ones just go, no, I'm not gonna, because there's something wrong here.
The best way to handle a situation like this is usually step-by-step troubleshooting, which means disconnect every connector and reconnect them one at a time and find out which one is the problem. Now, with a power supply,
That's problematic because there's certain things you don't want to just have partial connections to. Like you don't want to have just the primary power to the motherboard if there's secondary powers required.
Yeah.
Because that could be bad.
So what you need to do is put in all the required ones, which is the 24-pin power connector, as well as anything for the CPU. And unfortunately, anything for if you have integrated graphics, it would be a good idea to remove your graphics card and run off the integrated graphics while you're doing this troubleshooting. If you don't have integrated graphics, that makes this a little trickier because one of the power cables that carries a lot of power is whatever goes to your video card. It's going to be a little bit of trial and error. And since you said it had a 15-minute cutoff, I would probably take out your video card, any excess drives that you're not using. You don't say if you have an M.2. I'm going to presume you have an M.2 here. Any drives you're not using, any USB connections you have on there inside, take those, including the front header, because a crimp in there could cause a short. All the connectors you don't need, and you're going to go start the system up with just the 24-pin and the CPU, run it for about an hour, do what you would normally do, browse the internet, watch some YouTube, that kind of thing, see if it shuts off again. And you want to do this with the panel closed. If it doesn't shut off again, okay, 24-pin CPU is good. Then one at a time, keep adding those connectors back until you get to the one that makes the system go, fuck you, I'm out.
Now, it may not do that if one of the connections was just mildly loose.
Right.
Or there was something going on. You may reconnect everything and it all goes, I'm fine. And you put the panel back on and it goes, I'm still fine. And you go, what happened here, Gary? Why are you doing this to me?
And you might have just found that's how you troubleshoot. And once you get everything back together, just keep an eye on it. Make sure it's working.
Yeah. So the very first computer I ever put together for my personal use, I did not put the 24-pin connector on solidly enough, and things weren't going well. And I took it to the shop where I bought the parts and said, I'm not sure if I have good parts here. And he looked at it and goes, junk. And it booted right up. And I'm like, well, I feel dumb.
So, let's see. All right. Well, yeah. So just go through the step-by-step and you should be all right. If you still have trouble with it after that, give us a call send us an email. We'll see if we can help you out. All right. One more came in from Daryl here. Hello, Nash and Mike. I'm at my wit's end trying to find a TV antenna that actually works. My mom is constantly lamenting she can only get one of our local stations, and that has issues where she constantly has to readjust the antenna. Broadcast tower for all the local stations in roughly the same direction from us as well, within the 35-mile radius. What antenna can I actually get to our broadcast channels to come in properly for under $100? Because of combined medical issues, we can't install an outside antenna unless we get someone for us to do it within the budget. Well, there is one I've been using. Now, it is an outdoor antenna, but it also will work in an attic, or presumably it will kind of work inside as well. It's only $50. This is the one we've got for ours. It is an RCA attic outdoor compact design HD TV antenna. And this is only $50 at Home Depot or online. It's not very expensive. Probably might even find it on sale for closer to $40. It is a very simple thing. It is mostly just metal. There's no circuitry involved in this dang thing. It's mostly just you assemble it from parts. It's flat packed, and then you just run the wire, and the trick with that is it's not just the antenna. It's what's between you and the broadcast towers.
Indeed.
That's been the biggest. It took me a while to get ours situated in such a way that we get a pretty good amount of signal from it. And even then, it's still a bit of a problem. I've got it pointed in about the right direction. There are apps for your phone, you look up TV antenna apps on your app store. You'll find some that will allow you to use the compass in your phone to point your antenna in the right direction to get the most channels for your area. This one's not terrible. It's trying to get a good picture of it. It's mainly if there's something in the way, and it's hard to tell depending on the distance to the towers that you're trying to get back. That can cause issues. I've generally found this to be a pretty decent design. My towers are less than 50 miles away. I think actually closer to 30 miles at most. So it's not a very big distance, relatively speaking. The further away your tower is, the more trouble you're going to have. You say within 15 to 35 miles, within 15 to 20 miles, you're in good distance for this antenna to work. The leaf ones I've had trouble with, the indoor antennas. Indoor antennas are always kind of tricky. I've had some luck with those, but they always come back kind of limited. The outdoor ones have had the best results. And this one, you have to point it and leave it. Once you get it pointed and set, you're pretty good. But this is as simple as you can get it. It's just, I think, aluminum and steel, a little bit of plastic to hold it together. That's it. There's no circuitry. There's no stuff in there. You could always look into maybe getting a signal enhancer. They make a couple of those, but your mileage may vary on how well those actually work or do anything. There are various different people have different, takes on that. Is there a brand name or model or anything? RCA, the actual model, what's it called? They just call it the Attic Outdoor Compact Design HD Antenna from RCA. Not an endorsement, not being paid by them. Just, this is the one I use, and I've had pretty good results with it. If you have an attic, it might be worth trying that out. But it also is going to depend on the material your house is made out of. Metal roofs, we have a metal roof, and that causes trouble with that sort of thing. So outdoor is, what we have to. But yeah, it's not very high above our roof where I mounted it. It's got pretty good reception. So that's what I recommend. It's only $50, which, for a lot of people, only $50. It's still a lot of money, but what you'll for the performance you get off of it, it's pretty good. You don't have to go crazy, especially considering you're within 20 miles of a tower. You don't have to go crazy with your antenna. You have pretty good chance of getting that. All right, that is going to do it for us this week. Folks, thank you for your questions. Thank you for being here. I hope we were helpful to you. That's what we're here to do, is trying to help. If you've got questions for us, put those in the YouTube comments for this video, or send those to requests@radio.air.com, and we'll help you out. Otherwise, we'll be back here next week, normal time on a Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, for Mike and myself, we'll see you then. Good night, everybody.